You control nothing, or at least that's what they've made you believe. Think about all the times someone convinced you to do something without you even realizing it. Was it really your decision, or did someone plant the idea in your head and you just nurtured it until it bloomed? If you think you've always acted on your own will, you're living in an illusion. The truth is brutal. The world is full of puppeteers, and if you're not one of them, you're the puppet. But here's the difference between those who control and those who are controlled. The former never impose. They just make others act as they want without them noticing. True manipulation is invisible. It's a whisper instead of a command, an emotion implanted rather than a direct instruction. And the worst part? You've already experienced it firsthand. Remember the last time you changed your mind without realizing how it happened? A thought planted by someone else, an apparently innocent comment, a well-calculated gesture. That's real power, moving others without raising suspicion. But here's the question that makes you uneasy. What would happen if you were the one controlling the board? If instead of being pushed, you were the one moving the pieces? Because the difference between those who win and those who lose in this game is simple. The winners know that power isn't imposed. It's induced. The problem is that we've been taught wrong. We've been sold the idea that influence is about speaking loudly, being authoritative, imposing our will. But those who really run the world never raise their voice. They don't need to. True strategists make others follow their ideas, believing they are their own. And that's what no one has told you. Manipulation isn't about shouting or threatening. It's not about convincing with arguments or imposing with force. It's something much subtler, a psychological dance where you make people walk where you want them to without them realizing you're guiding them. Do you want to know how it works? First, identify the right people. Don't try to manipulate everyone, only those who really matter. The impressionable ones, those who are seeking guidance without admitting it. Those who believe they are making their own decisions but actually need someone else to make them for them. Second, make them believe the idea is theirs. Resistance disappears when people feel they are in control. If you want someone to do something, don't tell them to do it. Subtly implant the idea. Let them come to the conclusion on their own. A comment here, a hint there. The human mind hates orders, but loves its own ideas. And if you do this right, they'll defend your plan as if it were their own. Third, fragment the opposition. The biggest threat to control is not resistance, but the organization of resistance. If a group of people unites against you, you lose control. But if you manage to plant doubt, provoke small divisions, or make them turn against each other, they weaken. Divide and conquer. But that's not enough. If you really want to control, you need to understand human emotion. Logic moves thoughts, but emotion moves actions. No one acts based on reason. They act because they feel something. Fear, desire, insecurity, pride. Identify what drives each person and use that emotion as leverage. Don't tell them what to do. Make them feel it's necessary. And here comes the most dangerous part, because all of this has a price. Playing with the minds of others has consequences. If you're discovered, you become the enemy. If you abuse this power, sooner or later, someone else will learn your methods and use them against you. Control is a weapon, and like any weapon, it can turn against you. History is full of strategists who thought they were invincible, until someone else learned to play better than they did. That's why the final question is not whether you can manipulate others. The real question is, are you willing to accept the consequences of doing so? Because once you cross that line, there's no turning back. Now you know power is not about forcing, it's about guiding. It's not about speaking, it's about making others speak for you. And the great paradox is this: the less it seems like you have control, the more control you'll actually have. The world is not run by those who shout the loudest, but by those who know how to pull the strings in silence. The question is, will you remain a puppet, or will you learn how to handle the strings? But this is just the beginning. If you really want to master the art of influence, you need to go beyond. You need to understand something that most never come to grasp. People don't follow ideas, they follow emotions. Think of any great movement in history, any figure that has changed the course of humanity. How did they do it? It wasn't with perfect arguments, nor with irrefutable data. It was with emotion, with a vision that made people feel something. Because when emotion comes into play, logic becomes irrelevant. Have you noticed how people fiercely defend ideas they can't even explain well? How they fight for beliefs they never questioned? It's because those ideas are tied to their identity, to their sense of belonging. And here's the key. If you want to influence someone, make your idea become part of their identity. Because people can change their minds, but they don't change their identity without resistance. No one wants to admit they've been wrong their whole life. But if you manage to get them to adopt an idea as part of who they are, they'll defend it to the death. Not because you asked them to, but because doing so would give them a reason to exist. This is where we enter dangerous territory, because this is not common persuasion. It's not about convincing, it's about programming, inserting an idea into someone's mind without them even realizing it was planted. And for that, you need three things: exposure, repetition, and emotional connection. First, exposure. You can't change someone's way of thinking with one move. Resistance is natural, but if you introduce an idea little by little, indirectly, without pressure, the mind begins to accept it without realizing it. The unknown creates rejection, but the familiar becomes comfortable. Second, repetition. A lie told 1,000 times becomes truth. Not because reality changes, but because the human mind confuses familiarity with certainty. What we hear repeatedly becomes believable, even if it's false. That's why great manipulators never say something only once. They present it in different ways, at different times, until it's embedded in their target's mind. And third, emotional connection. It's not enough for someone to understand an idea. They need to feel it. The human brain responds more to emotion than to logic. If you can connect an idea with a strong emotion, fear, desire, pride, nostalgia, that idea becomes impossible to ignore. But here's something even deeper. Because most people believe they make rational decisions, they see themselves as logical, independent, with their own criteria. The reality is that most of their decisions have already been made for them before they even realize it. Society has designed their desires. Their experiences have conditioned their responses. Their biology programs them to react in certain ways. And if you understand these patterns, you can predict how they will act before they even know it themselves. For example, did you know that people trust those who listen to them more than those who talk to them? Not because the listener has better ideas, but because the simple act of being listened to creates a deep connection. If you want to influence someone, make them talk about themselves. Most people are desperate to be heard, to feel validated. Give them that and they'll see you as someone to trust. Another pattern: fear is more powerful than reward. People are more terrified of losing than they are of gaining. If you want someone to act, don't talk to them about what they can gain. Talk to them about what they can lose if they don't listen to you. And one more: people are attracted to what's exclusive. If something seems accessible to everyone, it loses its value. If you want someone to hold on to an idea, make them feel special for knowing it. Make them feel like they belong to a select group of those who understand what others don't see. Now let's talk about the biggest enemy of influence: organized opposition. Nothing destroys control faster than a group of people united against you. History proves it. Rebellions only work when there's cohesion. When people unite with a common goal, they can bring down empires. That's why, if you want to prevent them from challenging you, never let the opposition unite. Divide before they can act. How do you do that? By provoking internal conflict. You don't need to destroy a group, just make them fight among themselves. If you sow doubts, if you push the leaders to compete for power, if you manage to make them distrust each other, they weaken without you having to do anything. Politicians do this all the time. Governments have used it for centuries. Why do you think ideologies are in constant war? Because when people fight against each other, they can't unite against those who really have the power. The final dilemma: the price of manipulation. So far, everything sounds like an infallible strategy, and it is. But there's something no one warns you about in this game: When you play with the minds of others, you start seeing reality differently. You begin to distrust everything. If you learn to manipulate, you also learn to recognize when you're being manipulated. And when you see the strings, the magic disappears. You realize that many of the relationships, many of the beliefs, many of the emotions you once thought were genuine, never were. You begin to ask yourself, does this person really care about me? Or are they just responding to an influence I designed myself? And here's the paradox. When you learn to control, you also learn that absolute control doesn't exist. Because even if you master manipulation, even if you get others to do what you want, you will never be able to control one variable: human chaos. People don't always react the way you expect. Sometimes a simple emotion, a change in their lives, an internal revelation can make all your control collapse. That's why the final question is not just whether you can manipulate, but if you're prepared for what comes next. How far are you willing to go? How much power do you need before you feel it's enough? Or will you fall into the same trap as all those who have played this game before you, believing they're invincible? History is full of puppeteers who ended up hanged by their own strings. So the question that remains is this: do you want to learn how to influence, or would you rather keep believing that no one has ever manipulated you? If you found this video intriguing, don't forget to like and subscribe to Psychotic Secrets for more mind-bending insights. The secrets don't end here. Stay tuned. And remember, the world is a stage, and the strings are always moving. Will you pull them, or will you be pulled?